Item number 4, staff briefing, invited testimony, and policy discussion to consider a resolution on stopping the addition of fluoridation to treated water.
Could I make,
go ahead.
I just want to make one other statement. I really appreciate everyone who is helping us think through the drainage fee, and I appreciate the work of the staff. So we'll try to keep you apprised of our progress. And as we said before, at this point, our expectation is to have it on next Thursday's, not tomorrow's, agenda, and to have further discussion in front of work session next Tuesday, which is public. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kitchen. So on item 4, yes, let's please proceed. If it's okay with the committee, I'd like to see if we could divide some time between. We have a number of speakers. The city will, I think, present for, and we'll have some speakers in favor of the resolution. So if we could break it up into 30 minutes. Would that make sense if we set a 30-minute timer and we start going and see how we do? So, terrific. Thank you for coming. So let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you. My name is Jane Brazier. I'm the Assistant Director of the Water and Wastewater Treatment Program with Austin Water Utility.
And I'm Janet Pichette. I'm the Chief Epidemiologist with the Austin Travis County Health and Human Services Department. I'm here on behalf of Dr. Philip Wong, who couldn't be here today.
What I'm going to do today is just provide a little bit of background, and then we'd probably step aside and be prepared to respond to any concerns or issues that brought up later. Austin began fluoridating the water in 1973. This followed 2 non-binding referendums, one held in April of 1971 and one in September of 1972. Following that, Council passed the Resolution 720911-1, which was based on the returns of the elections, and they directed the utility to begin water fluoridation. Since then, the issue came up again in the late 2009, 10, 11, and in December of 2011, Council passed another resolution. I believe it's in the packet, 2011-1215-011, which required us to continue fluoridation. It also required notification of fluoridation issues be mailed out to citizens, as well as language on our internet for infants and children in the issue of fluoridation. We have met and continue to comply with all the requirements of this resolution. The background, we feed hydrofluorosilicic acid as the chemical that introduces the fluoride into the water. We have been feeding that as long as I know, as I'm aware of. We spent last year in fiscal year 2014, we spent $332,609 on the fluoride and $7,100 on labor and materials for the maintenance of the system. This gives a total of $339,726, which is about 38 cents a person for the fluoridation. We dose the fluoride. The fluoride is naturally occurring in the water at about 0.2 to 0.25 parts per million, and we raise it to the CDC recommended optimal level of 0.7 parts per million in the finished water. Prior to 2011, CDC had a recommended range of 0.7 to 1.2 parts per million. It was based on the assumption that the mean temperature of where you lived would dictate how much water you drank, so the more water you drank, the lower the fluoride needed to be. We are in a warmer climate. We were at the 0.7 prior to the change that CDC made to the 0.7 in 2011. That recommendation was finalized this year, last month, I believe. I need to make one clarification. CDC does not regulate the drinking water industry, the EPA does. CDC makes this recommended, what they believe is the optimum level for fluoridation. We are regulated by the EPA. So for fluoride levels by the EPA, the maximum contaminant level is 4.0 parts per million, which means we can never let the fluoride go above that level. They also have a secondary level of 2.0 parts per million. The difference is they believe the maximum contaminant level and the maximum contaminant level goal, which in both these cases is the 4, is designed to prevent diseases and health effects from the constituent, from the fluoride in this case. The 2.0 is to minimize the dental fluorosis, which could cause aesthetic problems for people. Again, we are way below both of those. In 2006, the NRC, the National Research Council, studied fluoridation. EPA asked them to look at both the maximum contaminant level and the secondary contaminant level. They're very clear in that study that they were only evaluating it at 4 parts per million and the 2 parts per million. They did not look at the optimal fluoridation level recommended by CDC. Recommendations that came out of that was that the EPA take a look again at the prevalence of fluoride in our environment now that we take in that we hadn't prior to that, and that there were some other studies that needed more research. To date, EPA has not changed the maximum contaminant level or the secondary recommended level for fluoride. So we are right now in full compliance. And do you have any questions on that? Yeah.
Sorry, before you go on, so you were talking about the difference between different climates, right? The warmer climates, people are going to drink more water. But
yes.
So does Austin vary the level during wintertime and the summer months?
No, we do not.
That kind of would seem like we would drink a lot less in the winter than we would in the summer. So I wonder why it wouldn't be changed.
On the when they had the range, that was quite a few utilities would do that, go higher in the winter and lower in the summer. We did lower ours to the 0.7 prior to 2011, and partly because we are in an inherently warmer area, and partly cost, to be honest.
Are you saying the complexity of the control system to change the concentration from the winter months to the summer months? Because you do have to have a pretty sophisticated control system, right, to make sure you don't add too much into the water. So I used to work in these industrial controls, so I know it's pretty serious.
Yeah.
But so you're already doing that, right? So it would seem like you could dial in a different concentration for winter compared to summer.
We could.
But you don't do that.
No, we follow the CDC recommendations.
Okay.
And I could add that the recommendations used to be a range in values, and what the most recent studies that have been conducted by CDC, they actually looked at the impact of air conditioning systems in the advent of air conditioning and what kind of impact that had on actual water consumption. And so they went ahead and did away with the range and then stuck with the lower end of the number, which is 0.7 parts per million. And I don't specifically have a presentation, but I'm here to answer any specific questions you may have related to any of the information.
So you're the health department's epidemiologist, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe you could just speak to us for a minute about to some extent, the historical reason for fluoride in the water, and then speak to us from a health perspective, the pros and cons from your perspective.
So, fluoridation's been going on for roughly, I'm going to say 70 years in the public health, as far as public health practice goes. Back when fluoridation was started, back then, one of the most common, and it's still one of the most common childhood chronic illnesses is dental caries. A lot of times back then, a lot of children had major extractions of their permanent teeth. By the time they graduated from high school, they, basically were in need of dentures and things like that. So one of the reasons for adding that optimization to the water was to kind of prevent, on a community-wide scale, protection to the population for dental caries.
And so what is the current thinking from a public health standpoint? And
the current thinking from a public health standpoint is that a lot of the data that's been researched, our position is in support of what CDC recommends as far as 0.7 parts per million in the drinking water as an optimal level to prevent dental caries while also preventing any kind of fluorosis in the population.
The resolution speaks to the change in thinking between, I guess, about the 1940s and the 1980s in regards to whether fluoride needs to be ingested or whether it's better to be applied in a topical manner through toothpaste or something else. Can you
I mean,
speak
I can
to that?
sort of address it. I think the American Dental Association would say that overall, if you ingest it on a daily basis throughout the day, you still get protection or added protection for all members of the population on, a consistent basis. There's added protection by using a topical spread, topical application of the product as well.
So I guess Councilmember Kitchen asked about the pros and cons from a health perspective, but I didn't. So you don't think that there's any cons from having fluoridated water?
Not from the current optimal level. As long as we're working within the optimal level that's recommended by CDC, I don't see any cons in that. In fact, there are some, cost-saving measures as far as protecting those members of the population who may not have dental care or that type of thing. There is some added benefit, for taxpayers in general.
So above the recommended level or above the level that we have here in our water, you would have concerns about potential...
If we have levels that were above the maximum contaminant level, I would have concerns, yes, of 4 parts per million. But a lot of the studies that you will hear cited, even what's the citations that are listed in this resolution, are looking at levels that are at above that 4 part per million level. Which is, 4 times what we are, or even higher than what we're actually seeing here in Austin.
Okay. Oh, I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to the part of the resolution that says that other developed nations that did have fluoride in their water have ceased, like Finland, Sweden, Germany?
So a lot of the European countries, they don't have the infrastructure as far as from the water system goes to add fluoride into the water. So what they're doing is they're adding the supplement through other things, like in a lot of the European countries, it's being added into the salt. Kind of like we add iodine into our salt, they add that supplement into the salt. So people are getting their fluoride from that intake.
Okay, so you're saying that it wasn't removed because of health concerns, but rather they just found a different way.
I think in some countries it was based on cost, maybe cost of the infrastructure, and the water system itself may not be conducive to adding it in, but a lot of them are related to just adding it through other means in the diet.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm understanding correctly, from a public health perspective, this is a tool that public health as a discipline, so to speak, uses to try to help address the incidence of dental diseases and caries or whatever amongst kids, right? Is that the...
And I would say all members of the population.
Okay.
But, kids especially.
Okay. So is there data that you would point to that that's generally accepted data that the public health uses?
So I do have a report that CDC has just issued.
Okay.
It's actually got a July-August 2015 date on it that I'd be happy to share with you. And it's basically CDC, and they convened a group of scientists, that came from FDA, USDA, EPA, NIH, and a whole host of other agencies to kind of review the data once again, just to make sure they're addressing all the new studies that are coming out in light of what's happened based on the past recommendation. And it was based on this review that they actually changed the recommendation, and so I do have that study available if you need it.
Okay. Does it also speak to the effectiveness as a public health strategy?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Would you be able to stay?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that very much. Okay. So I guess at this time we'd like to ask, we have some other invited testimony. Could they please come, and we'll reset the clock here. Thank you I think we're in receipt of we have a book here. I guess you gave us some documentation, the Water Fluoridation Resolution Compendium. And I think we all have copies of this, so thanks for bringing that.
Yes, my name is Justin Armand. I'm the Executive Director of Texans for Accountable Government. And I just wanted to say how grateful, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, that we are as residents of Austin, that we are taking up this issue again. There are literally thousands of peer-reviewed scientific research out there since the 1930s that basically have been sort of filtered out of the narrative of the great health authorities here in this country. Actually, one second. We invited a couple of expert witnesses here. They're the preeminent researchers, at least locally, Dr. Griffin Cole and Dr. Neil Carmen, and they're going to give very detailed presentations and cite these primary sources. In creating this compendium, if we filled this compendium, or if we gave you resources of all the primary sources, it literally wouldn't even be able to fit in your office. So we just wanted to get your hands on some of the primary sources cited in the resolution so you could see them for yourself. And in terms of the cons for local Austinites, just one thing I'd like to mention is that it's ostensibly for children. However, at the 0.7 parts per million level that we have here in Austin, our children, babies through breast milk are getting 175 times the fluoride levels through breast milk that they would. So when in breast milk, it's 0.004 parts per million. That's the natural fluoride level of breast milk. So many people reconstitute formula with tap water that's fluoridated. When they do that, they're getting these babies are getting 175 times the recommended EPA dosage. So that's one major con. And then also there's this paradigm shift that has been mentioned here and cited. And the scientific paradigm shift was in the 80s when you juxtapose systemic fluoride versus topical fluoride. So in the 1950s, Mrs. Troxler was asking about the historical context. It was believed universally that because of the way that the data was being looked at, that the benefits of fluoride were through ingestion, that children, the pre-eruptive stage, or the stage when the teeth were still, or the early stages, it would change the biochemistry of the teeth before the teeth had erupted, and most of it was believed back then that it was systemic. Well, now since the 1980s, it's believed that it's topical, right? So if you look at the research of fluoridated versus non-fluoridated, when you look at here, many of the European countries, they don't even fluoridate their salts. So if you look at the research over 5 decades, the trend was already going downwards in terms of tooth decay. And the American Dental Association, the CDC themselves, published statements across an array of scientists. It's absolutely conclusive, even by the proponents of fluoride, that the primary benefit and primary mechanism of action of fluoride is topical. And fluoride is universally available now through toothpaste, right? So it's not even conclusive that that is lessening tooth decay. However, to say that it's a public health concern, the science has already shown that it isn't. And then also in a recent publication by the Department of Health and Human Services on the prevalence and severity of dental fluorosis, even within the range, they've concluded that in the United States, adolescents now have 41% of adolescents have now dental fluorosis. And if you look at the moderate to severe fluorosis cases, it's now up to 4%. So it's increased 18% since the last survey in the 80s. And then in terms of the moderate to severe cases, it's more than doubled, right? So the Dr. Dean, DDS, the guy that he was primarily responsible for the clinical trials in the 50s and the 40s, which led the Public Health Service to endorse fluoride, he even stated that if there were a water fluoridation program, that even this causing mild fluorosis would be absolutely unacceptable. So I'd like to now introduce one of our panelists, Dr. Griffin Cole. Dr. Griffin Cole, he's a graduate of the University of Texas Health Science Service in San Antonio and has been practicing biological dentist, mercury-safe and fluoride-free since 1993. He achieved fellowship status in the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology in 2008, authored the Academy's fluoridation brochure and scientific research review on ozone use and root canal therapy, and currently serves as the Academy president. He has been published in numerous national dentist publications, including Contemporary Aesthetics and Dentistry Today, for both his cosmetic work and his commentary on dental issues. His most recent publication, Treatment of Biophosphonate-Related Osteonecrosis of the Jaw with Oxygen Ozone Therapy, published in May 2003 in the Journal of Implant and Advanced Clinical Dentistry, is the first documented case reported showing complete resolution of an osteonecrotic lesion utilizing only ozone therapy. And I'm sure all of us know exactly what we're talking about right here. So, Dr. Cole has also been featured on numerous television and radio news spots, including World News Tonight with Diane Sawyer for his expertise on water fluoridation and dental mercury issues. And did we want to give the panelists each time, or are they going to be kind of working together? Shall I introduce both of them now?
It's up to you.
Let's start with Dr. Griffin Cole's presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, council members. I appreciate the time here to come and speak about something that I'm very passionate about and have been talking about for about 2 decades now. The title of my slide, I don't feel is exaggerated at all, and the science will back me up on this, and my partner, Dr. Carmen, will touch on a lot of the science very soon. For those of you who don't know, it's not a nutrient. It's not essential for health. No study has ever shown a disease state where they lack fluoride. The actual fluoride that's added to our water, as was mentioned earlier, is hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a waste product from the fertilizer industry. It's not sodium fluoride. It's not calcium fluoride. It's not the same animal at all. The silicofluorides, if you look at all the science on it, and it's been looked at for about 50-plus years now, is really damning on how it gets through the body. It's not handled the same at all. This is the one way that you can get fluoride over the counter is toothpaste. And even that has a warning saying don't swallow it. So we're taught in dental school that it's the panacea. And I believe that the day I graduated and did for even a couple years. But after looking into the science, I realized that this was not the case at all. That and just right here, the actual toothpaste that you would use, they warn you that if you swallow more than a pea-sized amount to go see a poison control center. So the one type of fluoride that you can actually get over the counter, you're not allowed to swallow either. These are some examples that you've already seen probably in several handouts of what's happening really to our Austin kids. And I've got a slide here. I hope that shows up. That shows actual Austin kids with fluorosis. When you asked earlier about what were are there any cons to it, and she said not really at those levels, that's not true. Even as low as 0.7 levels, which they both just said that we've had for many years, Austin kids that are born and raised on Austin water have fluorosis. 41% of them do. And the reason why they lowered the level to 0.7 was not because they thought it seemed like the optimal level now. It's because of this issue. There are too many kids that their teeth are ruined from drinking fluoride. And mind you, that's the only effect that drinking fluoride has on teeth is a deleterious one. It's not beneficial. You can drink it all day. It has no effect on your teeth whatsoever in a beneficial way. Topical is the only means of actually being effective. There's some Austin kids here. A couple are from my practice. One's from another practice here in town. Kids that were born and raised. We verified it from the parents here in Austin. This is the comment that we hear all the time, right? It's water fluoridation is one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century. It sounds really impressive. And we hear it all the time from all the Surgeon Generals and everybody else that speaks. But all you got to do is go through the Freedom of Information Act to find out who actually said it. It's an economist and a dentist that are in the oral health division of the CDC, which is a very small amount of the 14,000 members of the CDC. That's their names. They're Scott Tomar, who had never published anything on fluoridation, and Susan Griffin, an economist. They're not toxicologists. 2 of 30 people in the oral health division. So when you hear that statement, just realize where it actually came from. It's not that damning after all. This is their actual position, by the way. These are quotes from the CDC. Fluoride's predominant effect is post-eruptive and topical. Why this is so important is that fluoridation is all about pre-eruption and systemic. This is the exact opposite of what fluoridation is supposed to do. Here's another comment as recent as 2012. We are unaware of data about the additional protection from tooth decay that could result from consumption of fluoridated drinking water. These are quotes that you can find. We've got everything documented. We've got all the citations for you, so you can find all these comments here. What does the FDA say? The FDA classifies fluoride as unapproved drug, and they've never approved any fluoride-containing supplements or over-the-counter drugs. This is as recent as 2005 commentary from the FDA. What does the World Health Organization say? I had to actually circle where our country is, because here's the deal. If you look on that graph, the top, I guess it's about 14 countries there, do not fluoridate. They're unfluoridated. The bottom 4 are fluoridated. Look at the difference. Can you tell me who's gone down in decay rates? Everybody has. Has nothing to do with drinking fluoridated water. It's across the board. And as you guys, I think, mentioned earlier, 98% of Western Europe doesn't fluoridate. And they don't all add it to their salt either. Sweden has no fluoride in their entire country as far as any kind of additional fluoride, and their decay rates are the same. There's no difference. So this new safe level, which has already been touched on several times, so I won't waste any more time on it. Again, it was done because of the adolescents getting all the fluorosis. Bottle-fed babies. This is really why we're here. And he also mentioned this as well. It's way more than what human breast milk has. There's a protective mechanism in breast milk to keep fluoride at such a low level because of the harm that it causes. So here we are. How do you control the dosage? I mean, as adults, we drink way more, water, and yet we get less exposure than a baby that is bottle-fed, where 80% of their diet is water. And in East Austin, maybe where they can't afford to go buy spring water all the time, or whatever areas there are, that's not fair. They have to use tap water. This was a warning that was sent out to us members of the ADA in 2006, and this was shortly after the NRC came out with a really great report, which Dr. Carmen will touch on. But look at this. It says, if liquid concentrate or powdered infant formula is the primary source of nutrition, it should be mixed with water that is fluoride-free or contains low levels of fluoride to reduce the risk of fluorosis. This is from the people who think fluoridation is wonderful. They're actually telling us as dentists what to tell our patients. This is huge. This is Mosaic. This is the company that sells the hydrofluorosilicic acid to Austin. And I want you to look at, I made it larger because it's so hard to read, but this was their MSDS sheet, which was changed in May 2011. This was right after that warning came out saying let's lower to 0.7. And that whole warning is geared toward children. This is a information sheet about their product. Workers, staff employees, adults who look at this. This has nothing to do with children at all, yet they're doing this warning. And the reason why they're doing it, it takes all liability off of them. As soon as it gets into our tanks here in Austin, now the city of Austin is responsible. So if any kind of litigation goes on down the road with, oh, my child was ruined by this water, Mosaic's out of it. It was very clever, actually, to include that on their MSDS sheet. One final comment here on this. This was a statement from 1979, and I show this because when you read this, I think we all get the same feeling as what's happening here. And it says, individual dentists must be convinced that they not be familiar with scientific reports and field investigations on fluoridation to be effective participants, and that non-participation is overt neglect of personal responsibility. I'm insulted by this because I want to look at the science and the field reports. I want to know what's really out there instead of just what I'm being spoon-fed. And this is the problem, I think, is a lot of my colleagues, with all due respect, they do what they're told. Oftentimes we practice in these little blinders, and I like to look out. And the science is absolutely convincing and is getting more and more with all the new IQ reports that are out there. There's 41 animal studies showing lowered IQ in humans when they're exposed to water fluoridation. It just goes on and on, which Dr. Carmen will touch on. But one final comment that I did want to say is that, Austin has the St. David's Foundation, which has this wonderful dental van that goes to all the Title I schools, and we've treated thousands of kids over the past decade and a half with sealants and exams and cleanings and education. This is the way we lower decay rates. It's not adding an artificial silico fluoride to our water system. This is the way we do it. And I'd be willing to volunteer time on my own to give out toothbrushes or education, and I'm sure I have plenty of colleagues who would as well. We can't, our babies and children have no choice, but we do, so it's time to make the right one. Thank you.
So I'd like to introduce Dr. Neil Carman. I found the best way to introduce Sierra Club scientist Neil Carman, PhD, was by reading the words directly from Texas Senate Resolution 562 from the 81st Texas Legislature, where he was officially honored on the Senate floor for his many years of outstanding work on environmental air quality issues in Texas. He worked for the Texas Air Control Board and now part of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality from 1980 to 1992. He performed numerous samplings of pollutants throughout the Texas Air Control Board's Air Quality Control Region 6 based on Odessa. His expert testimony in cases filed by the Texas Attorney General led to permanent injunctive relief for many Texans affected by air pollution. Since coming to the Sierra Club in 1992, Dr. Carman has worked with citizens throughout the state to hold corporations accountable for violations of the Clean Air Act. He has also worked to train Texas communities in performing their own ambient air monitoring. Thank you, Neil Carman.
I think the most important thing here is that we're talking about an extremely hazardous chemical.
Sorry, you are Dr. Carman, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
And, you know, the most sensitive population that we have are the babies and the infants, because their system is not as developed. And therefore, when they ingest fluoride, they retain a much greater percentage, 90 to 95%. Compared to anode. So this fluoride that the city is putting into the water is being ingested. It's being taken up into the tissues, the cells, the organs, and having effects. So I would just emphasize to you that first, do no harm. Add no fluoride to protect the most sensitive members of the population. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency actually, quite a few years ago, declared fluoride as an endocrine disruptor. And those are contaminants. They're organic chemicals, they're heavy metals, and fluoride is one of them. And that means basically, in the case of the thyroid, that fluoride can cause dysfunction. And today we know that thyroid dysfunction is a very common endocrine disorder. The National Institutes of Health has stated research shows that endocrine disruptors may pose the greatest risk during prenatal and early postnatal development when organ and neural systems are forming. And this is a difficult issue because, you know, you can't really do research on, you know, how much fluoride damage is being done to infants and young children. So the fluoride risk here is that reduced thyroid function in pregnant women is linked to lower IQ in their children. This is well known. So how much does fluoride contribute to that problem with pregnant women and then their children? This is the chemical people have notified. It's hydrofluorosilicic acid. It's got a lot of fluorine in it. That's the F. It's in the Mosaic's waste, but it's not completely the same as the natural calcium fluoride. And I would just emphasize that the hydrofluorosilicic acid that the city buys has a lot of impurities, and the chemistry of it is much more complex than just saying it's some fluoride, because actually there's ion complexes that form within the hydrofluorosilicic acid itself. So this is far more complex chemistry than what we've been led to believe. This is from a report. I've given you the citation there. It's from a European scientist, Declan. He spent over a year doing a 373-page independent review about the toxicity and so forth of fluoride, environmental impacts. And what you see in the middle, dental and skeletal fluorosis, is really the only thing that most people think about, because all the areas above that dental fluorosis and skeletal fluorosis and the areas below, it shows 11 different types of health impacts at a cellular level on the upper 11 items. And on the lower ones, you see calcium and magnesium deficiency, neurological disorders, cardiovascular disease, periodontal disease, osteoporosis, gastrointestinal effects, cancer, renal, kidney effects, genetic damage, pineal gland impacts, and diabetes. So, and on the left part of the slide, it shows hexafluorosilicic acid. That's the same chemical that the city uses. And that the theory is that it just is ingested, has fluoride ion. But the thing is that our stomach has a very acidic pH. I mean, this is common knowledge. When you ingest fluoride, there is a potential for it to reassociate, has hydrofluoric acid, which is a very deadly chemical, rather than just saying it stays dissociated and then it goes into the blood, has the fluoride ion. So again, we're talking about a very complex chemistry, toxicity, once this goes into the digestive system and goes into the blood. In 2006, this report on fluoride in drinking water looked at 1,100 studies worldwide. And this should have really been the end of fluoridation, except the panel of 12 experts was not asked to look at water fluoridation itself. But what they showed is that there's tremendous effects in terms of fluoride in our biochemistry, in our bones, our teeth, the reproductive and developmental system, and especially in the brain and neurotoxicity. So these are some of the NRC's findings, that fluoride is neurotoxic. It damages the brain. It damages the bone. It lowers thyroid function, and that in the first part of the report, I think one of the most shocking items is it says that infants are getting too much fluoride. They're being overdosed. Now, a study that I've handed you a copy of that just came out in February by a group of people in England, Peckham et al. It was published in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health. And this was a thyroid study that the title of it are fluoride levels in drinking water associated with hypothyroidism prevalence in England. A large observational study of general practice data and fluoride levels in drinking water. The people that were, they looked at the reports in medical doctors' offices, okay? So these are medically diagnosed cases of hypothyroidism. And it's the first study ever to look at this, even though you think we would have done this in the United States. What they found is higher levels of fluoride in drinking water provide a useful contribution for predicting prevalence of hypothyroidism. They also noted high hypothyroidism prevalence was found to be at least 30% more likely in practices located in areas with fluoride levels above the excess of 0.3 parts per million. That's much lower than what Austin uses at 0.7. This population study supports earlier hypotheses that fluoride is associated with hypothyroidism. We haven't done any kind of a study in Austin. But the point is that this study in the UK indicates that people are suffering hypothyroidism at much lower levels than 0.7 parts per million. Another study that just came out, I think in February, by two Canadian researchers, Mallon and Till, in Environmental Health. The title of it, Exposure to Fluoridated Water, an Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder Among Children and Adolescents in the United States, an Ecological Association. So this basically looked at state-by-state data on both attention deficit ADHD, and it also looked at fluoridation. The abstract is epidemiological and animal-based studies have suggested that prenatal and postnatal fluoride exposure has adverse effects on neurodevelopment. We're talking children. Conclusion, parents reported higher rates of medically diagnosed ADHD in their children in states in which a greater proportion of people receive fluoridated water from public water supplies. What they concluded is that in 2003, the data they looked at for that year, there were 60,000 extra ADHD cases. In the year 2007, 97,000 extra ADHD cases. This is across the United States. And in 2011, 134,000 extra ADHD cases. So this is the graph they put in there. The top one is 2011. The middle one is 2007, and the lower line is 2003. And the point is that on the far right, you see where there's the most fluoridation. For example, Austin and much of Texas would be in those right-hand areas. Whereas on the left hand, you see ADHD prevalence, and you see how it drops down in states and areas where there is no fluoridation or less fluoridation. So this is a very large study. Has Griffin pointed out that mother's milk has been designed to protect the baby against fluoride because it only has 4 parts per billion that has been determined to be in mother's milk. But Austin is putting it in at 175 times that level of mother's milk. The weight of evidence from many animal and human studies, there's dozens and dozens, is that fluoride is a powerful neurotoxicant. It can interfere with brain chemistry. 44 out of 51 studies have found an association between fairly modest exposure to fluoride and lower IQ. Most of these studies have been done in China, India, Mexico, Japan, and Iran, but not in the United States. You might wonder, why don't we see these studies in the U.S.? Because they don't want them done. 19 of the studies, the fluoride concentration was less than 4 parts per million, which is the current EPA safe drinking water standard. Of over 100 animal studies, they found there was damage to the hippocampus in the brain. There's neuron degeneration in the nervous system, which can be anywhere throughout the brain and down into the nervous system. The inhibition of cholinesterase. Now, this is a very critical enzyme, which is one of the problems with fluoride, and that is it's a well-known enzyme inhibitor, and cholinesterase plays a very important role in the nervous system. Also, damage to nicotinic receptors in the muscles and decreased brain glucose utilization. So fluoride is a very powerful chemical. It also increases oxidative stress. This was a study that came out a few years ago. It's called the Harvard Meta-Analysis of IQ Studies by Choi, Sun, Zhang, and Granjin. And these people looked at quite a few of the studies, and what they found, they looked at 27 studies comparing the IQ levels in high versus low fluoride villages. And what they found is that the results were remarkably consistent in that 26 of the 27 studies showed lower average IQ in the high fluoride villages versus the low fluoride villages. And the IQ lowering was about 7 points. They've now done a preliminary study with 51 children. The children were asked to remember a sequence of numbers and report forwards and backwards. What they found is that the children with dental fluorosis performed less well than those without. The significance here is that the dental fluorosis is an indicator of systemic effects in the brain and the body to those children. So that's why dental fluorosis is a very important issue when we see so much of it. Dr. Philip Granjin is a toxicologist at the Harvard School of Public Health. He says that fluoride seems to fit in with lead, mercury, and other poisons that cause chemical brain drain. And he's just released a new book in the last year called Only One Chance. Because once something like lead or fluoride impacts the brain of a child, you cannot reverse it. I'll just make a few more slides here. Economic implications. In 2005, a group of people looked at what is the lifetime income loss associated with one IQ point loss. Okay, there's a difference between boys and girls. But anyway, so the point is here that if you just look at one IQ loss from fluoride, the costs in the U.S. population with 4 million births a year is 51 to 88 billion lifetime income for a loss of one IQ point. And I don't know about you, but I don't need any IQ losses. I believe that we are at a tipping point on fluoride in terms of the harm it causes. In the 1970s and by 1980, we reached a similar tipping point on lead. We had leaded gasoline for 50 years. We thought it was wonderful in the gasoline, except for the fact that it caused brain damage and IQ impacts to children in cities. So in 1980, the EPA banned lead. We are very close within the next few years of a tipping point on fluoride where it will be stopped. In fact, it could be in 10 years, the city of Austin will be asked to lower even the natural calcium fluoride down some. It could be that that's a risk. So in conclusion, the risk of children's IQ loss at current exposure levels in the U.S. is high. Fluoride exposures must be reduced. Addition of fluoride to drinking water and use of fluoride supplement tablets must cease. Economic consequences of IQ loss by U.S. children are substantial. So the point is, first, do no harm. Add no fluoride. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carson. You finished with 3 seconds on the 30-minute clock, so congratulations on your timing. Is there any other questions before we've got some speakers to get through here. Do you want to go ahead and get into our...
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's do that. Okay, so first we have Ray, is it Nadler Olenek? And now let's see, is there Steve Hanna here? There's Steve. Christine Shaw, and also Walter Olenek is here. Yeah, there he is. So does that give you 12 minutes?
There's a David King. If I need 3 more, I think David King will donate. Yes, there he is.
Okay.
Just a quick question for the timing. Our council meeting, I think, or our committee meeting is supposed to go until 6 o'clock, but it looks like we have a lot of speakers signed up. Do we have any kind of time estimate? I may need to leave at some point if we're not finished by 6.
That's a good one. Let me wait for Councilmember Kitchen here.
Sorry.
We were talking about timing and how we wanted to proceed. What is your scheduling like for being able to say? And we have one more item, right? We have item number 5 regarding a variance on a service extension request. So we do have another agenda item.
Okay.
We would like to finish as quickly as we could. So
I'll try.
I was going to say we've had a lot of very, very good testimony, as you know.
Yes.
So
well.
Yeah, I would just say that this has been excellent testimony with with all the materials you provided and everything.
You can just turn the fluoride off and we're done.
Well, let me say something to that. What we had in front of us was a resolution that what this committee would do if it chose, and if we get to it and have a vote, we could either table it or we could vote to refer it to the full city council committee. So that's kind of the decision we would have at the end of our testimony. So.
And your hope is that we would take a vote on the resolution tonight?
I would like to, sure. I would like to. So when do you have to go? Do you have a hard schedule break?
I mean, by like 6:30.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
maybe
Yes.
Mrs. Troxler, you could give us an amount. I mean, a lot of people here have full passion, but we want a vote to happen tonight, definitely. So if you could give us an amount, I'm sure that we can all work cooperatively to respect your time.
So is there a consensus here? What would you like to do as far as timing?
How much time do we need for the last item?
That's a good question. I think we have some people here for the last item. Would that take 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes? Yeah, I'll try to get 15 to 20 minutes on the last item.
Okay, well, we work back from that.
So we work back from that, then we're going to need to finish this by 6, no later than 6. So,
okay.
So we have about, could we do it in 30 minutes? Get all this
I can cut
done?
most of my own time. I thank you for this opportunity. As I was going out the door today, I discovered on the newsstands something very exciting. A nationally distributed Women's Health magazine has an article about it on the front page about the devastation that fluoride is causing to American women now, to their thyroids specifically. And featured in this article is Dr. Laura Presley of Austin, but that's just the icing on the cake. It's a good article, and I would like, with your permission, to bring it up now.
Sure.
Okay, I think I'm just going to go straight to a presentation that one of you has seen before. Several people here, some real experts, have commented on the in a technical way on the fluorosilicic acid that Austin uses for water fluoridation, and I'm going to explain in a simpler way. The Austin Water Utility on its website claims that it's only merely adjusting upward a quote, naturally occurring chemical compound found in many groundwaters, unquote, upward to some arbitrary so-called optimal level. That is not correct. And I will illustrate it as follows. We've all seen the diagram, the diamond diagram, where hazardous materials are stored. And the one that concerns us here in particular is the blue diamond, which represents threat to health or toxicity. Now, there is a natural form of fluoride called calcium fluoride. That is true, but it is not used for water fluoridation because it's so much more valuable as a raw material in industrial processes like making phosphate fertilizer. And the fluorosilicic acid that comes back to us is the waste product of those same fertilizer operations, unpurified straight from the smokestacks. So I found a company called Science Lab, which deals in both kinds of fluoride, the natural calcium fluoride and the fluorosilicic acid, same as we use. They have what is hazardous materials have what's called the material safety data sheet, and one of our previous speakers has commented on it. This is calcium fluoride right here, the natural kind of calcium, and you notice that it's been assigned a health threat level of 2. Now here is the fluorosilicic acid that we use. It's been assigned a health threat of 3. So you can see 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. These are not the same product at all. And finally, here is a tank, an acid tank from Austin's own Ulrich plant. And you'll notice that the personnel there apparently don't think 3 is even a high enough rating of danger from this product. They've assigned it a 4, the highest, the worst. Okay? So, okay, I think I'll leave it. I think I'll leave it at that, because that is the point I wanted to make. These are not the same product, and the one we use is bad.
Okay, thank you very much. So next we have Julie Menace. Julie here? And yeah. Is Julie here? Can we go to Linda Green? Linda Green. And after Linda Green, Gail Borst. Gail, there's Gail. Okay. Okay, I show our clock here. We've about 25 minutes.
Okay, I won't take that long as well.
Well, no, because that's for our total, yeah. So.
Oh, well, some people donated to my time also.
They did. That's correct.
Yes. So I want to focus on children and infants, and there is a myth that the city water utility and the CDC and the EPA propose, and that's that fluoride is especially important for children and infants. And this is a myth. This is false. In reality, fluoride does the most harm to children and infants. Because of their small size, infants can receive up to 400% more fluoride per pound of body weight than adults, damaging developing bodies, organs, and brains. In 2006, the National Research Council stated, "It is apparent that fluoride has the ability to interfere with the function of the brain." And I would like people to consider, too, that pets are impacted by this fluoridated water. Pets, just like small children, get an overdose of fluoride. And pets are actually being treated now for thyroid disease. And as a 2006 National Research Council reported about a rare form of bone cancer in young men, it's also occurring in dogs in particular. So these are issues to be concerned about. And I do take issue with the fact that the presentation by the pro-fluoridation side said that 70 years ago we had horrible dental caries and in our children, and even false teeth, having to replace their teeth with false teeth. Well, 70 years ago, dental hygiene wasn't considered that important. There weren't that many people that were so aware of the influence of beneficial effects of flossing and brushing. And again, people have the choice to use fluoridated toothpaste, whereas we don't have the choice in the matter of drinking this hexafluorosilicic acid waste in our water. And also, we have to keep in mind that there are many other sources of fluoride that we ingest, including pesticides, nonstick cookware, tea. The actual tea plant draws up a great deal of fluoride from the natural calcium fluoride, and children swallowing fluoridated toothpaste, as well as the natural occurring fluoride in the water. And in the last, say, 15 years, they've noticed that 41%, maybe approaching more to 45% of teens and children have dental fluorosis. And this is not just the common occurrence of some kind of cosmetic blotches on their teeth. It's the outward sign of overdose of fluoride. So when you see 41% of our children and teens with dental fluorosis, you can probably assume that they have other negative impacts on their thyroid and their bones. In January 7, 2011, the Health and Human Services and the CDC or EPA reported that ingesting too much fluoride results in brittle bones and risk of bone fracture, as well as this dental fluorosis in children. And I'd like to play a small, short video by a pediatrician in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hi, I'm Dr. Yolanda White. I'm a primary care pediatrician who no longer supports water fluoridation. Pediatricians like myself are taught to pay very close attention to the proper weight-based dosage for each drug, and to make sure that our patients do not receive more of a drug than is necessary or safe. But unfortunately, when it comes to fluoride, this basic precaution is not being followed. In fact, the dose of fluoride that's supposedly effective in preventing dental cavities is very close to the dose that, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, can cause harm for some children. So it has a very narrow therapeutic window. Since children now receive fluoride from so many different sources, it's virtually impossible for a doctor to determine exactly how much fluoride each child is actually getting. And if you can't determine the amount of fluoride, then you can't determine the dose. And if you can't determine the dose of fluoride, then you can't determine safety. As a pediatrician, I am deeply concerned that fluoride is not good for babies and that they are at risk for harmful side effects. The most clearly visible side effect is dental fluorosis, a permanent staining of the teeth caused by fluoride's interference with normal tooth development. There's a significant number of children in the United States who now have some form of dental fluorosis. According to the Centers for Disease Control, dental fluorosis affects 41% of teenagers. That's millions of children who now have a visible form of chronic fluoride toxicity. As a pediatrician, I'm concerned that fluoride could also affect tissues and organs that are not visible, like the bones, the thyroid, and the brain. My concern is based in part on a large body of research finding that modestly elevated levels of fluoride can reduce a child's intelligence, especially if there's a deficient intake of iodine. Children are disproportionately affected by fluoride for several key reasons. They receive a greater fluoride dose per body weight when compared to adults. They have far more fluoride incorporated into their skeleton than adults. They have a lower kidney excretion of fluoride into their urine, meaning more fluoride gets reabsorbed back into their bloodstream where it can bioaccumulate. And their developing brains are more susceptible to fluoride's toxicity. This can affect their educational achievement. And these unique characteristics of children can no longer be ignored. I'm also concerned by research findings showing that dental fluorosis is higher in the Black community, even the more severe forms, where the teeth can start to erode and develop black and brown stains. This health disparity and environmental injustice will need to be addressed. Even though federal agencies recommended lowering fluoride concentration in water down to 0.7 parts per million, that reduction is slow to implement in each jurisdiction, and frankly, it's not enough. Over-the-counter water filters can't remove the fluoride. So my heart goes out to pregnant women, seniors, those with kidney, thyroid, and other health conditions who can't afford a water purification process to remove the fluoride. They shouldn't even be put in this position. Because water is for everyone, but fluoride is not. Therefore, it's my professional recommendation that we discontinue water fluoridation in the United States. I know I don't want to drink fluoridated water, and I commend residents of Portland, Oregon for fighting hard for the right to keep fluoride out of their water, and also states like New Hampshire and cities like Milwaukee for including infant advisories on their water bills. This past May, New York City held their first children's anti-fluoride rally. Sooner or later, you too will have to make some very important decisions about fluoride. And so it's better to be safe and responsible now so we won't have to pay for it later. It's all about prevention. Thank you.
So I just want to finish up by saying that this morning I went on to the Fluoride-Free Austin website. The people who've spoken so far are some of the co-founders of Fluoride-Free Austin, and I did a little experiment where you can go to the fluoridefreeaustin.com website and click Take Action, and it sends a letter to Mayor and City Council. So I'm hoping that you got a YouTube video that was made on January 7, 2011, when the Health and Human Services and EPA reported that there was too much fluoride in our water. It's called FedGov, says too much fluoride in water. And I hope y'all will take the 2 minutes and 42 seconds to watch that video. And I appreciate so much your concern over this issue. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Let me, I think what I'd like to do, we're going to run out of time here, but I'm going to read the names. There's quite a few people that have signed up, and we can't get to them all. Is Dr. Laura Presley here? If you could speak for a few minutes while you come up, I'm just going to go and read the names on the record that have signed up. Let me do that quickly. Are they already in the record?
I would read them.
Let's just read them into the record. Dr. Laura Presley, Kathy, and all of these, unless I state otherwise, all of these are in favor of the resolution against the fluoride, unless I note otherwise. Kathy Lehman, Jeffrey Solomon, Julie Menace, Linda Green, Heather Fazio, Hester Pollard, Mary Krennick, Gail Borst, William Doyle, Emilio Cronus, Krista Clark, Joseph Gcon, sorry if I messed that up, Chuck Thomas, John Daisley, David King, Marion Molotok, Mel Layton, Nancy Reed, Ellie Phillips, DDS, Madeline Villatoro, Mitchell Stein, Julie Williams, Jonathan Colwell. I hope I got everybody there. Thank you. So we have about, I think we want to get this done if we could by, well, can you do about 5 minutes? Laura, would that work?
It'll be short.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, council members. I'm Dr. Laura Presley, author of multiple peer-reviewed scientific papers. I have 4 U.S. patents, and I've worked 17 years as a semiconductor device engineer and manager, and I have actual direct experience with fluoridated compounds and material safety data sheets. I have used fluoridated compounds as etchants in the fabrication of computer chips. And I'd like to refer to the material safety data sheet that has been provided to you. I want you to take a look at this if you can. On page 1, this MSDS sheet is provided to the City of Austin by the chemical supplier Mosaic. On page 1, it's very interesting, under section 1, it says primary use. And it says that it is an industrial chemical. And that term, industrial chemical, refers to the intended use and grade of the chemical that you're purchasing.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Can you tell us what you're referring to?
You bet. In your book?
In the book.
Yeah,
okay.
It says, look at the tab Mosaic. It's all, a little bit, it's close to the back.
Okay.
Maybe next to the last.
Okay, yep, thank you.
You got it? All righty. So on page 1 there, it says primary use, and it says industrial chemical. I want you to note that it doesn't say pharmaceutical, okay, which is approved for ingestion. So we are using this industrial chemical for ingestion of our babies and our children and us here in Austin. Okay, also on page 1 at the far kind of bottom on the left, you see potential health effects, that section, okay? I want you to go to page 2, and that health section continues. And in that section called Signs and Symptoms, I want to read this. The effects of overexposure of this chemical may include severe irritation and burns of the mouth, nose, and throat. That's referring to a chemical handler who handles this chemical. And I've been in this, I was in the semiconductor industry for 17 years. I've seen many material safety data sheets, and they're used for chemical handlers as warnings to those people who manage and deal with these compounds. But go a little further down, and it has a section called Other Comments. And Dr. Cole talked a little bit about this, but I want to kind of expound on this. And I'm going to read it. It says, prolonged or repeated overexposure to fluoride compounds may cause fluorosis. He showed us that our children in Austin have fluorosis. His patients, he and another dentist in Austin, have multiple patients with fluorosis. Okay, the warning is right here. Fluorosis is characterized by skeletal changes consisting of osteosclerosis, which is hardening of abnormal density of bone, and osteomalacia, softening of bones, and the mottled discoloration of the enamel of teeth. And this parenthesis is very important. It says, if exposure occurs during enamel formation. When does enamel formation occur? When you're an infant and when you're a child. This warning is for children. This warning is not for chemical handlers. This warning is to your end user, children of Austin. I want that to be very, very clear. This company, as Dr. Cole said, is giving themselves a liability pass, okay? Now, the last thing I want to bring up is really the question for you as council members is, are we as the public being overexposed? The two dentists in town who have been supporting us for years say yes. They have patients. They have children who are overexposed with dental fluorosis. So my question is, what data do you need? What more data do you need to discern whether we're being overexposed as being warned by your supplier? Okay? I want to thank you for listening and for bringing this resolution forward. It takes a lot of courage to hear the truth. The truth has a lot of power. And I'm so grateful for you guys listening and giving us time to talk about this. We need your further courage to do the right thing and move this resolution to the full council. Our children in Austin are being damaged. We need your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Preston. If there's no objection, could we have 5 minutes if the city staff would like to add anything, if you'd like to, for another 5 minutes before we try to wrap it up?
Can you hear me? Okay. Again, a lot of these things that you're hearing today, we still support the position that CDC's recommendation that optimal fluoride levels in the drinking water at 0.7 is not a health consequence. You know, what's interesting about this whole debate is that a lot of the groups are speaking from the same data sets that we're looking at the National Research Council data. We're citing some of the same information. Some of the information that you heard here today is new information. EPA actually does do a systematic review of this information every time they review the standard. When they do that review, they try to take the compendium of the scientific data that has occurred since the last review and make sure they're taking it into consideration. So that's why you're getting all this information. As far as like what CDC and the Health and Human Services area is looking like, again, when the National Research Council is looking at this information, they're looking at concentrations between 2 and 4 parts per million. What they're basing the maximum contaminant level on. What you're also hearing too is about dosing and whether or not dosing is taken into consideration when we're looking at the optimal level, and it is in fact taken into consideration. And part of the review includes a relative source contribution by EPA that actually looks at fluoride intake by all parties, so that they're addressing all the additional sources of fluoride that you're taking in through your food, through the air, through the water, and just considering that, and that's how they actually establish that lower end level that's considered optimal. So it does consider dosing in it. Again, the review will continue on. There'll be additional studies that continue to occur over time. And when EPA does recommend, or when it's time to review the new studies, they'll go again and review those. What CDC and Health and Human Services does is they try to take the data and they try to look at it from a perspective of what that means in the United States. So they do a systematic review by evaluating studies that are relevant to what the exposures are here. So when you're talking about these studies in China, you're talking about studies that show exposures that are much higher, 5 times higher than what we're talking about as our optimal level. So, I mean, that's pretty much what it is.
Okay.
And, you know, we can, again, debate it point by point. The staff here at the city would be more than willing to set aside time to make a more thorough presentation for you. Again, when we were provided short notice, we didn't really know what we were required to present, but we'd be very willing to do that.
I would appreciate that, frankly.
Sure.
I think that would be very helpful. I don't know if you're ready for discussion, but I personally am very interested in the data, and I really appreciate the data that you all have made available. This is excellent. I need some time to digest it. And my thought would be that I think we've made a significant step today by having this hearing and having this information presented to us, and I very much appreciate it. I'm not ready to vote, and so I would prefer to have the time. You know, I'd be interested in time setting aside in our August agenda.
And I would like to make one other comment. You know, we did reach out to the Capital Area Dental Society, also the Texas Dental Association, and due to the short time frame, they were not able to be here to, you know, discuss and give their point of view. So, you know, they're very interested in being represented as well and giving you their viewpoint.
Well, that would be helpful to me.
Just a quick technical note. Do you happen to remember or know what is the background fluoride level in the water? We're taking our water out of the lake system. Would you know that what it is? And in other words, if there were toxicity, if the EPA or CDC changed its position and says, you got to take fluoride out of the water, what are we at right now, roughly?
Our naturally occurring fluoride that's in the raw water is between 0.2 and 0.25 parts per million.
Okay.
So basically, we heard one number. I think at 0.3, someone was saying at 0.3 parts per million there might be some adverse health effects, according to some of the things we've heard. So we're kind of close to that background level where it's conceivable we could be ordered in years ahead to start removing fluoride. So I don't know.
And you see that, you've seen that phenomenon with arsenic, you know, naturally occurring arsenic when they lowered the standard.
So the science evolves, right? As people.
And I think that's, again, the reason why EPA does do they ask the National Resource Council to actually pull the data together so that there is a review of the new data that comes out, just like a lot of these studies that are being discussed tonight. And you know, at that point, as it evolves, the same thing happened with lead as well. So it is evolutionary.
Okay.
Do you know if there are any other cities in the United States that have taken specific steps to remove fluoride?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's some cities that have it. I think there's 44 of the top 50 United States, or top populated cities actually have water fluoridation. 44 of the top 50.
Of the cities that have removed
that I'm not sure which cities. That I'd have to go back and research. I'm not sure what specific cities have eliminated it from their water supply.
That would be helpful information,
Sure.
particularly if they've
we'd be happy to look into that.
Particularly if they've done any studies about the impact. You know, I don't know. It would depend on how long they've removed it and that sort of thing. But if they have any kind of studies of the impact from a public health perspective, that would be helpful.
We can certainly look into that.
Okay, so let's, sorry, do you have a quick comment to make?
One quick sentence just to dovetail what you just said.
Okay.
That report that they have referenced now many times, and we did as well, their final statement in that report by the 12 scientists was that the MCLG for fluoride in drinking water should be 0. That was their final, that was their comment. That was the whole point of the report, was that 4 is way too high. So, I mean, we can talk all the data we want, but all the scientists are agreeing right now that it's too
No, I
high
don't
and
think
we
all
don't
the
need it.
scientists agree. I think it's debatable.
Okay. Well, that's why we're having a debate.
And that's why we're having this discussion.
Well,
Yeah,
you know
that's
what?
why we're having a debate.
Of the 359 references that are in the ADA's fluoridation facts, less than 20 come from any kind of journal that's not a dental one. Less than 20. They're all dental journals or dental meetings.
And I think, again, it's a topic, people are very passionate about it. It's one that, people have strong feelings about. And again, I think it is kind of interesting that we are looking at the same document and coming up with different viewpoints on the situation. So
Okay.
the staff would be very willing to provide you a more in-depth discussion about the situation if you need.
Okay, thank you very much. So that brings it back to the dais here. So what would you like to do?
Well, I mean, I think that this was certainly an interesting discussion. I appreciate you, Councilmember Zimmerman, for bringing this forward because, as she just said, it clearly people are interpreting information in different ways, and it is something that that warrants us taking a look at. And I mean, I for one feel like I've heard information tonight that has caused me to ask more questions and to try to understand the issue better. So, so I appreciate all of you who came here and provided us with that information. As far as the resolution goes, I don't know that I'm ready to necessarily support the specific language that's in the resolution. I would certainly support language that would direct the city manager to come to us with options regarding fluoride, or come to us with the report or something, something that would allow us to have a little bit more time for discussion. But I don't know, if that's something that would be amenable to you.
Do you want to?
Voting out this resolution is voting it to be heard by the entire council, so we have plenty of time to even set up a date before the council. A lot of education.
Sure. Let me, Mr. Armand, just to point out, to remind us all, we have the option of tabling it. We can take a motion and vote on sending it to the full city council with no recommendation, or a recommendation that they take more testimony and possibly approve it. So we do have all our options on the table. So I am looking for a motion to do something.
Well, here's my perspective. I think that our role as the committee, and our job as a committee is to really think through and take the time it takes to think through all the options and hear all the information. So this is the first step, and this is an important first step. So I would just say that to the folks that are here, whatever we do here, we're listening to you, and we're going to I want to take a next step, but I also want it to be a next step that doesn't move it too fast, because that wouldn't be appropriate. I think that we have to get all the information as a committee. We have to take the time. I would like to read all this. I think it's very important information. So I would suggest that, I would support either way. I would suggest that we take it up in August and think through a resolution along the lines of what you're suggesting, Councilmember Troxler, that we could bring back in written form, perhaps, if you all are up for that.
Well, I think the point here is if you want to hear more about the scientific data and the arguments for either side, but I think the issue is either the community expects us either to fluoridate the water or to not fluoridate the water. Talk about additional, because there's already some background, fluoride in it. So I think that's a decision we need to make. So what I'm hearing from my other colleagues here is you probably want to bring this back for another hearing.
Well,
and have a chance to review the information we've already received, and then maybe have one more hearing on the matter before we make a decision.
Well, I'd also like to bring back some options for language.
Okay.
I mean, because what you have is one option, one way that we might proceed, but there's some other ways that we might proceed too.
Okay. So is there a motion here that we reconsider this item in the August?
Sure, I'll make
August
that.
agenda. Okay. Is that a motion? Will you second that?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm in favor too. So I guess what we'll do then is we'll ask for this agenda item to come back, and I guess I want to ask if the city staff has some experts that can testify as to why we should do this. I heard quite a bit of, I think, what's pretty good evidence testimony that we should not be doing it at all, that we should not be adding fluoride. But I'd like to hear. I'd like to hear the other side and have another session similar to what we had today.
I would like to say, given the appropriate amount of time and being able to gather those advocates for fluoridation to be present.
Would August be enough time?
I think it would be plenty of time.
All right, terrific. Thank you.
The other thing that's of interest to me is that, this is a public health issue, and so what are other communities? It's a public health issue that that data is what we're looking for. I mean, and what we're looking for is the results, and we're doing it. We started fluoridation for a specific reason, and that was to help kids with, dental decay. So if it's not getting us there, and if there are the kinds of concerns that people are raising, then we need to rethink it. And so part of the information I'd like to know is, what is the state of the art, so to speak, from a public health perspective on the thinking about how to prevent dental decay in children. So that kind of information.
We can look into that for you as well.
Okay, because fluoridation is a pretty blunt instrument, in terms of public health, and a lot of that we do. Obviously we do that because public health is a community-wide kind of approach rather than an individual specific approach to health. So I'm not saying that you would never want to do that. It's just that, everybody's drinking the water, not just the kids, and there are other ways that kids, as some people have testified, there are other ways that, that we work on kids preventing tooth decay. So anyway.
And I appreciate your understanding the difference between public health and primary care.
Yeah, I do. I understand
the importance of that as well.
Yeah, I understand. And it's important. I just think that we should, I think it's appropriate for us to have this discussion. As you mentioned before, we had this discussion. Previous years, people had this discussion about lead and other things. So anyway.
Okay.
Excuse me, Vince, could you grant me 10 seconds to say something? I signed up to speak here at 2 p.m. today, and it took me 10 seconds to say what I want to say.
Okay, why don't you come forward and give us your name and your remarks. So
My name is John Daisley, and I'm a former friend of a former council member who told me 4 years ago, when I first was made aware of this issue, that the Austin City Council paid no mind whatsoever to the fluoride-free Austin movement. And I would like to have some assurance from you that that is no longer the case, because I think that is the ultimate disrespect. Thank you.
I guess I would just say in response, I think the fact that we're considering this resolution and have had this conversation tonight is, proof that it's definitely being considered by the new council. So,
okay. If that concludes, I think our conclusion here was we were going to bring this back in August.
Sorry, one more clarification. I just want to be, typically when we do have public comment, we have people who are taking time out of their schedules to be here. I just want to be clear whether or not we're planning to take another round of public comment in August, because I don't want the people who have come here tonight and who have put together really good presentations to feel like they have to come back and give the presentations because we're going to have new speakers. So one option would also be for if there were people who, if there's new information or if there's additional information from city staff or others out there who weren't able to make the committee meeting tonight, they could also set up individual appointments with our offices so that, we don't make everybody come back again in August.
Well, I think the short answer to that, we had a discussion on this just recently about public commentary versus public hearing. And we are moving into a public hearing thing because we've got something on paper that we're considering. So I think what's going to happen in August is there'll be an edited version, perhaps, of that resolution. So it will be a public hearing in August.
That's okay with me.
Yeah, and we'll probably have another proposal on the table by the time August comes. So.
Yeah, that's okay with me.